Hi, welcome to Pennsylvania Newsmakers, and as always, thanks for watching. Well, the Pennsylvania primary, will it mean anything by the time the Republicans get through the nomination stage? And then an update on transportation funding, all of that and more when Pennsylvania Newsmakers returns.
This is Pennsylvania Newsmakers, a fast-paced, unrehearsed weekly discussion with and about the leaders who shape your world. And now, here's your host, Terry Madonna.
Hi, welcome back to the program. Well, guess what? The Republican nomination struggle for the presidency goes on and goes on and goes on. Joining me, as I promised, are two political scientists who we're going to bring in from time to time, going to chat about the presidential election. We're also going to figure out whether Pennsylvania's primary to be held this year on April 24th will really matter. Across from me is Jim Hoefler. He's a political science professor at Dickinson, and my colleague at Franklin and Marshall College, Berwood Yost. Both political scientists, both can get into trouble on this program if you're not careful. I won't even ask you for a prediction here, Jim. Let me start with you. Let's talk about the nomination. As we sit here now, it is still unclear who the nominee will be, although it looks like Mitt Romney won two in a row. You can make an argument that Iowa didn't win, he won by a handful of votes. How do you see this playing out in the next couple of weeks? You think this struggle will go on, maybe get to Pennsylvania without a nominee pretty well having sewed up, the contest with enough delegates, or certainly with people dropping out?
Yeah.
What are the possibilities here?
I think the odds are unlikely that, it looks like Mitt Romney's race to lose right now. Yeah. But what happens in Texas this weekend with the evangelical leaders and who drops out and how quickly they drop out? If conservatives can coalesce around, it's not going to be Perry, but Santorum or Gingrich, that could delay things. But neither one of them have the legs, the money, the organization, or the staying power, power to compete in these other big states coming up.
I want to. Berwood, of course, is at Franklin and Marshall College, where he directs the Center for Opinion Research, does a lot of polling. So I'm going to ask you a polling question. It's interesting that Mitt Romney has been about 20 to 30% in almost every poll you see. And yeah, he did a little better in New Hampshire, a neighboring state, when he was governor. Is it possible that the social conservatives, the evangelicals, could line up as Jim? Is that a real possibility, and make this a mano, one social conservative, let's say, right, and then Mitt Romney representing, the more traditional Republicans? Is that possible?
Well, I think it's certainly a possibility, but right now you've got these alternatives who are dividing the vote against Romney.
Right.
So I think that it's a possibility, but we haven't seen one of these folks catch fire yet and really create a candidate that people can coalesce around. Now, as Jim said, this weekend there is a meeting in Texas of evangelical leaders, and they're going to perhaps endorse somebody. That endorsement could mean a great deal. I think I see a Santorum candidacy as benefiting from that more than a Gingrich candidacy. I think, in his service, he was viewed less as a cultural conservative than Santorum has been. So,
I think that's certainly true.
Yeah, and so I think that's the possibility that I really see Santorum as the alternative that they could coalesce around. Perry would be the one, I think, in the long term that could challenge Romney. He can have the money in the organization, but he is really falling apart as a candidate.
Yeah, well, I mean, the odd thing about this is, and folks who've taught this over the years, I don't remember a time, and I went back and looked, where the Republicans, there have been 5 different leaders, polling leaders, as Berwood knows, 5. They're beginning to act like Democrats.
Right.
That's almost ahistorical, isn't it?
Yeah, it reminds me of a merry-go-round where the horses come up one after the other, and first it was Michelle Bachmann, and then it was Rick Perry, and then it was Herman Cain, and then it was Rick Santorum, and but the man running the merry-go-round, I think, is Romney, and he's loving this. By the way, this is very good for him. That the more people that stay in the race divide that conservative vote. Helps him out because he's going to win these races.
It's good for him perhaps in the primary. I think that this may signal real problems in the general election. I think there's some historical evidence that when you have a serious nomination fight, it's signaling a weakness within your party. And I'm wondering if Romney wins, if all these divisions in the polls and all these up and down candidates don't signify the fact that perhaps social conservatives or Tea Partiers, other people won't desert the party. They won't have the energy.
That's possible.
That's
How about
right.
Ron Paul?
Exactly.
It's unclear yet whether he will run as a third-party candidate, which obviously would hurt the Republicans, I think, more than the Democrats, unless I'm wrong about that.
Right. He's the only one, I think, that we're going to see standing by the time we get to Pennsylvania, and may go all the way to the convention and have some kind of divided convention. He's the person I'd be worried about. He's the Ralph Nader, so to speak, of the Republican Party right now, and that could be a real problem going into the fall for them.
All right, we're going to run to a quick break. When we come back, we're going to take a look at the possibilities that would reach Pennsylvania that would be relevant. We were certainly relevant 4 years ago when two senators, one Barack Obama and the other one is a certain Secretary of State whose husband was formerly President of the United States, had a knockdown, drag-out in our own state. I'm talking about Hillary Clinton. We'll be back in a moment.
This broadcast of Pennsylvania Newsmakers is presented by the Pennsylvania Chamber of Business and Industry, the statewide voice of business, and by the Pennsylvania Cyber Charter School, bringing educational innovation and freedom to the children of Pennsylvania. This broadcast of Pennsylvania Newsmakers is presented by ReconnectPA.org, supporting a comprehensive transportation funding solution, and by the Pennsylvania Manufacturers Association. Business in Pennsylvania is our business.
Hi, welcome back to our presidential panel with Berwood Yost and Jim Hoefler. Both of these guys are political scientists. Let's pursue this. I mean, what would have to happen, and tell me right or wrong, what would have to happen is that we'd have to have these conservative candidates, or the more conservative candidates, stay in the race long enough so that nobody can get a big delegate lead, carving up the vote so that no one begins a runaway. Berwood, is that one way it reaches our state?
That's probably the only way it reaches our state. But, I mean, the perception right now is that this is Mitt Romney's race to lose, and that you look at his fundraising, you look at his organization, he has the ability to get beyond South Carolina and Florida and to challenge in all these other states. We've got the big Super Tuesday races in early March. He's going to have the organization to do that. So I think, ultimately, if Romney is able to do well in South Carolina, I don't even think he has to win it. I think he just has to be competitive. He goes on to Florida. He's leading in the polls there. I think that propels him to start really accumulating delegates. And some of these people can be a thorn in his side, but I don't think anyone's going to slow him down.
But here's the point. If one of in poll after poll after poll that we've done at F&M, Berwood and not, here's what we find, Jim. The voters this year don't much care about, nor are they focused on social issues. I'm not saying they're not important, but this is all about jobs and the economy. How does that take away from a jobs message if you get social conservatives who are highlighting an issue, set of policies that aren't relevant to what the voters concern? Should the Republicans have some concern that they're not on a message that the voters care about?
Well, it is a big problem for the party, but in these primaries, the social conservatives are going to continue to be an important force.
No doubt.
So here's the scenario. Say this weekend the evangelicals coalesce around Rick Santorum. And I got to say, Newt Gingrich may be moving up in the polls. There's a poll out this morning that says he's within a dead heat of Romney. But long term, he's really hurt himself by putting out this, or his supporters putting out this very negative, and very well done, by the way. I watched the whole thing today. Michael Moore would have been happy. He wished he could have done something this good. It's damning, and it's going to move the polls, but it's going to hurt him. And I was listening to talk radio yesterday. Beck, Hannity, Limbaugh, they're all over and Santorum too. They're all over Gingrich saying, what are you doing? This is not good for the party. It's not good for us. And he's not going to have, I don't think, the staying power.
Yeah. Do you agree with that?
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
Well, one other important question, and I'm not sure how this, I get questioned all the time, as I'm sure you do. Will we have any other candidates? Will someone else come out of the night, so to speak? Is that likely to happen?
Who? I mean, Chris Christie's left.
Yeah.
Sarah Palin's out. I mean, I don't think she's a viable candidate.
Now, hold on. You're missing the most important guy of all.
Who's that?
Donald Trump.
Donald Trump. Yeah.
No, the race
neither
now.
of you,
He was fired before he was hired.
He was fired. That's a good way to put it. But your point is, without the money and without the organization, as Berwood points out, once we get to Super Tuesday, there are 8 or 9 contests, I think, on one day alone.
Right.
Have we reached that point where no one could run, or there's no one to come along that would help out here?
That's probably true, but it's also true that there are still openings for whoever remains standing in the race for something to happen to Romney. That they want to be that last person standing and carry the message forward. And maybe this is now the race for the vice president, too.
But the problem with the scenario is Romney has shown himself to be an incredibly disciplined candidate. He's on message.
Man, is that not true?
Right.
Wow.
And he's such a good candidate that it's hard to see a bolt from the blue. He's been campaigning now for years and years and years. His record's pretty well known. He's dealt with those issues. It's hard for me to see something unknown appearing to create a shock and change the dynamics of that race. That's always possible.
The comment about being fired the other day, maybe just a little blip in the screen. He's talking about firing people, and it was a small thing, but boy, everybody
Look at Howard Dean. Howard Dean lets off with a scream.
It doesn't take much.
And you know what? When I watched that, and I'm sure you guys did because they played it over and over.
Yeah.
That didn't seem like anything special to me.
Right.
Did it you?
No, not
Why
at
should
all.
that drive somebody out? Because somebody yelled a little bit. We yell on this program all the time. Nobody ever said we're going to get rid of it.
I also have to say that this 30-minute ad, and they'll cut it down into small snippets. This could be something of a swift boat moment. It's that kind of damning critique of the leader. And it could be, it's not likely, but it could be a number of Republicans say, well, we don't like Newt for doing that, but we see some strange vulnerabilities here. We don't want to end up with a John Kerry presidency.
But I get the final word. But almost every candidate has some of these flaws. I mean, the Republicans are in search for the dream candidate, the perfect candidate with no warts, no problems. That's not American politics. No. Inconsistencies in American politics.
Yeah.
All right, we'll have you guys back in a couple of weeks, and you'll continue to update us on the presidential. Maybe we even mention President Obama one of these days, but we got to get through the nomination process first. All right, transportation funding. This is the first of our programs in the new year to deal with that subject. Figure out what are we going to do with the billions and billions of dollars that are necessary to fund Pennsylvania's highways and bridges. We'll be back in a moment.
This broadcast of Pennsylvania Newsmakers is brought to you by Pennsylvania Credit Union Association. Pennsylvania Credit Unions, where people are worth more than money. To find a credit union that is right for you, check out ibelong.org. And by the Energy Association of Pennsylvania, Pennsylvania's energy information source. This broadcast of Pennsylvania Newsmakers is presented by the State System of Higher Education. 14 state-owned universities. The state system is the largest provider of higher education in Pennsylvania. And by the Hospital and Health System Association of Pennsylvania, working towards a healthy Pennsylvania.
Hi, welcome back to the program. Well, as we start this new year, we're going to pick up a couple of the big issues that we have followed for the last couple of years, and one of them, of course, is transportation funding. It's been identified by voters in poll after poll as one of the critical issues that Pennsylvanians recognize, and they certainly recognize the need to do the repairs on the bridges and upgrade the roads. And we're not talking about new construction here. We're talking about just maintaining the system that we have. Well, Our go-to guy on this is Bob Latham. He's sitting across from me. He's the Executive VP with the Associated Pennsylvania Constructors. Bob, thanks for coming on.
Yeah, good morning, Terry.
All right, here we are. We're back in another year, and we're going to figure out where all this stands. Before we get into some aspects of it that I want to ask you about,
Sure.
present the problem in a summary, if you can, about why this need is so pressing.
Well, we just haven't been investing in infrastructure in the last 10 to 20 years as a nation and as a state. It's been since 1997 since we've increased funding of any significant amount. In 2005, a Blue Ribbon panel identified a need of about $1.7 billion. In 2010, it was up to 3.5. And the bottom line is, if we keep kicking this can down the road, the problem only gets worse. And we have a number of highways, structurally bad bridges, I guess, in Pennsylvania. That's not mean they're going to fall down. They just need to be repaired. Our geography and our population warrants that we need to do things in transportation infrastructure, not just roads, but ports, airports, mass transit as well.
Well, what has the problem been in trying to get the funding? Is it that you have to raise taxes or fees, and some of that is not popular, even though the people want roads and bridges repaired? It's figuring out a way, the funding of it. I mean, that's the serious problem, isn't it?
Well, right. And in research that we've done, we found that people are willing to pay for better roads. The other thing that people need to realize is that it's costing you not. When we don't get to solutions, when we don't raise revenues or gradually increase, say, the gas tax or registration fees, when we keep just delaying that, yeah, it costs you.
More. Yeah.
So people out there, you're paying for bad roads. So you can either pay for good roads or you can pay for bad ones. And I would say, in the Harrisburg area, ask the people coming from northern York County whether they enjoy sitting on 83 North day after day after day after day. And you can find those areas almost everywhere in the Commonwealth.
If I ask you to name me the two big ways that you think the roads and bridges should be paid for, what would you tell me?
Well, one of the things that's been different about transportation over the years is that it's basically a user fee. So if you use the roads, you pay. If you have a fleet of trucks that's on the roads and using the roads, you pay. So our tax structure for highways has always been the gasoline tax, and we haven't addressed that again in 14, 15 years. What other commodity, I guess, if you will, what other utility, for example, has not increased their rates? Have your electric rates been the same for the last 14 years? I know I just got a letter from Pennsylvania American Water, said your water rates are going up. Well, I've got two choices: don't drink or pay it. That's the thing. Yeah. And people look, and in some cases, the problem is that you have to take these things through the General Assembly and through the political process. Yep. And I guess elected officials have been reluctant to step up.
All right, I want to run to a break.
Sure.
And when we come back, I want to ask you if you see any breakthrough in terms of bipartisanship, whether this is a Republican or Democratic issue,
Sure,
and how that might work out. All right, we'll be back in a moment.
This broadcast of Pennsylvania Newsmakers is presented by Highmark Blue Shield, changing the way health plans work for business with a variety of plan options for employers and more choices for employees. Information is available at highmark.com. Have a greater hand in your company's health. And by the Pennsylvania Healthcare Association, the future of long-term care.
Hi, welcome back. Well, we're bringing you up to date on one of the critical issues that certainly the voters have told us is critical to them, and that is fixing Pennsylvania's roads and bridges. Doing this update is Bob Latham. He's with the Associated Pennsylvania Constructors. All right, Bob, do you see any partisan differences here? I mean, it seems to me now that you do have supporters for getting the transportation funding in both parties.
Yeah, I mean, one of the big disappointments we had was back in August, there were 5 issues that were identified as what were going to be tackled during the fall. You know, you had the privatization of liquor stores, right, you had school vouchers, redistricting, and transportation was one of those, the Marcellus Shale.
Right.
And transportation, interestingly enough, is the one issue that has bipartisan, bicameral support, and it's the one thing we haven't gone to work on. I mean, they started all. The only thing they accomplished was redistricting, but all these other issues got some attention. And the thing is, for an issue like this to get really rolling, you need the governor to step out and say where he is on this. Transportation funding has always been initiated by the executive, and that's what we're waiting for. Now, nice thing about it is we have public statements by Senator Jake Corman of State College, and then just last week we had the leadership of the House Democratic Caucus step up and say, look, we're willing to work with you in a bipartisan manner. We are not going to politicize this issue. It is that important, and we have to get it done. Even in an election year when obviously the House is up for grabs and they are all wrangling on those things. So we think that that's very positive. I mean, we've seen public surveys that have said that more than 50-some% of people in Pennsylvania view this as the issue that needs to get solved more than the other ones. So I would say, I think we've got a tremendous potential for support in the House and in the Senate. We just need Governor Corbett to tell us where he stands on this.
Well, are we basically down to 2 or 3 ideas about how to fund it? One is to raise the oil franchise tax. You talked about that. The other is motor vehicle registration and license fee increases. Is there any other conceivable way that you think can be employed to get the transportation funding moving?
Well, I think that the user fee system is really what you're looking at here. Now, if you go back and look at the recommendations of the commission that I was happy to serve on, we had a number of ideas that we put forth. And one of the things I don't want to forget is that there is a plan in there that would fund not just highways, but would fund public transit in our urban centers and in our rural public transit. It's very important as well. And in addition to that, we have established an intermodal fund. We have tremendous needs in our ports, and believe it or not, we have inland ports like in Pittsburgh, and then we have, of course, Erie, and then Philadelphia. These are tremendous economic drivers. They can create a lot of jobs. And so that portion of the thing is very important as well. I would like to touch on just one thing.
About 30 seconds.
We keep hearing from people that, we don't really have a problem. We've got a lot of money there, and we could just get more efficient. Well, if we're 10% inefficient, let's just say let's give them that. That's $250 million. We still have a $2 billion problem. It's not going to be solved without some revenue.
You're exactly right. All right. Thanks for watching this edition of Pennsylvania Newsmakers, and as always, stay well.